My name's Andre Dolphin. If you're visiting here for the very first time at Portlife, we hope you feel very, very welcome. We'd love to meet with you afterwards, have a coffee or a milkshake and just say hello. Please feel very welcome to stay behind and just catch up with us. That would be fantastic. Just a couple of really quick notices and announcements. Man Cave is coming up very soon and we have a stand out in the foyer, the outer foyer. We'd love you guys to come along and be part of that, see Jason and his team after the service. That would be fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Josh now and we're going to have a little update in regards to Christmas baskets.
Well, you just saw a bit of footage from last year, and what you're seeing there in the foyer is some people from the community coming along and getting their Christmas basket. And just looking back at that footage there just reminds me how awesome it was to see this church come together and do that last year, as they've done for the last 3 years. And we're going to do it again, as you know, this year. We will in a few weeks' time be saying like who wants to be involved with the actual putting of them together, because that is a huge job as well. But at the moment we are needing to raise the funds for that, and as I said last week, we need $7,500 if we're going to build 250 of these things this Christmas. These baskets go out to people from our community that don't go to church but have for some reason trusted us with either their kids because they've sent their kids to youth group or they've come along to Green Monkeys. There's been a way in which they've decided to make some form of a connection with this church, and we just want to bless them this Christmas, just like we have the last 3. But also, as we've done in previous years, we know that Christmas, for most of us, is a wonderful time, but for some people it's an awful time. And it reminds them of the passing of loved ones, or they're just gravely ill and just can't. It's hard to find a reason to be joyful at Christmas for some people. And we know that you know people in your street or in your local neighbourhood that would be experiencing those situations. And we want to be able to bless those as well. And so we make sure that we allocate a large number of those baskets that you can just take back into your community and just bless people on behalf of the church and just say, look, our church just wants to bless you this Christmas. There's nothing more, nothing less. We don't do it with any sort of a bait sort of thing to try and suck them to come in here or anything. It's purely just blessing them this Christmas. And so please prayerfully consider that. Over the next month, we would love it if you are happy to be part of that you put donations in through online, or you can do it through the envelopes, but please mark it Christmas baskets. And if you're doing it online, put Christmas baskets in it so that we know that that is money for the Christmas baskets. It's great that a church spends its time at Christmas blessing others. I think it's so important, not just entertaining our own with carols, but actually going and blessing the local community, particularly those that this is going to be a tough Christmas. I trust that you will prayerfully consider that. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Interesting, we're just going to go into a time of offering, and really, these type of things that come up, people are doing these all the time, and I've seen this in this church for years, and I think the price that we're looking to try and give, I think we can go over and above, but that's just my attitude, because I think God is a God of abundance, and we shouldn't limit what we think we can give. So I think we could even do more than that. That's just my personal opinion, but I've seen that because this church has given for years above and beyond to enable us to have our staff here, to do missions trips, to help out in times of need. So I just want to thank you for your generous giving. We have our details online. We don't take up the buckets here at the moment due to our current situation we're facing in the world, but we have little boxes at the back, and if you can put your details in there, that would be fantastic as well.
Alexa, remind me to order roses.
I just noted hoses in your Amazon cart and sent you some
No, Alexa,
options.
I said roses.
Calling Moses Mobile.
Hey, babe, don't forget the kids.
I won't.
Okay. Oh,
I forgot the kids.
Promise, are you doing your homework?
I will, but first things first.
Good morning. Sorry about that. Today we are continuing our series on First Things First, and I've called the message today Rocks First. Last week Nick started this series and it was a really great message, and I would encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to watch that, go and have a look at that later online. In it he talked about being a disciple of Jesus, and he had three key points. First of all, disciples put Jesus first. Point number two, disciples accept that the Christian life may cost them everything. And thirdly, disciples stay salty. They continue to put Jesus first. And in Nick's message, he referred to this house that he was building at Ballarat. And he was talking about the fact that he had this problem with the soil, and it was going to cost an extra $30,000 just to put in the foundations to deal with that problem. Well, if you thought that was a bad real estate story, today I'm going to show you a property nightmare. We're looking at the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. And to do this, I want to go back in time. So we're going to start at 586 BC. God has just punished Judah's wickedness by sending the Babylonians in to destroy Jerusalem. They've demolished the temple, and they've taken thousands of the people of Jerusalem into exile. And you can read about this in 2 Kings chapter 25 if you want that story. We're not going there too much today, but that's where it is in 2 Kings. 47 years later, 539 BC, the king of Persia, Cyrus the Great, who's a long-term relative of Miley and Billy Ray, he conquers Babylon, and he starts to let the Jews return to Jerusalem. And we're going to kick it off with Ezra here this morning. In Ezra 1, it says, this is what King Cyrus of Persia says: "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He's appointed me to build him a temple in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any of you who are his people may go to Jerusalem in Judah to rebuild this temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, who lives in Jerusalem. And may your God be with you." Now, this temple that they're going to rebuild, remember this, it's been 47 years, so nearly 50 years it's been a ruin. So when the Jews return, they've got a huge job in rebuilding, and it's not like a little house. This thing is massive, remember. This is a huge construction. And so the first thing they do is they clear all the rubble, and then they lay the foundations. And, this takes nearly a couple of years. This is a massive job. And it says in Ezra 3, When the builders completed the foundation of the Lord's temple, the priests put on their robes and took their places to blow their trumpets. And the Levites, descendants of Asaph, clashed their cymbals to praise the Lord, just as King David had prescribed. With praise and thanks, they sang this song to the Lord. He is so good. His faithful love for Israel endures forever. Then all of the people gave a great shout, praising the Lord, because the foundation of the Lord's temple had been laid. You can imagine, like, this has gone on, this has been a long time coming, and they've finally achieved the first stage. They've got the slab down, all the foundations are in place, and they're celebrating. But not for too long. The non-Jews, the locals, they offer to help rebuild the temple. They can say, this is going to be a massive job. Would you like us to help? And it sounds, that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Like, that sounds like they're lovely people and they just want to be a blessing. What can we do? Let us help you. But the Jews knew that these locals had an agenda. They were pagan worshippers and they were looking for a foot in the door. And they would exploit the opportunity, if given the chance, to introduce new gods and new practices to the Jews. And their people would soon be compromising their beliefs. And so the Jews were like, nah, sorry, no way, you are not helping us. We are doing this on our own. We know what you're like, and you're not going anywhere near our people. In response, this is what the locals did. It says, then the local residents in Ezra 4, the local residents tried to discourage and frighten the people of Judah to keep them from their work. They bribed agents to work against them and to frustrate their plans. This went on during the entire reign of King Cyrus of Persia and lasted until King Darius of Persia took the throne. Now this took place in 536 BC. The locals have sabotaged the plans to the point that after the foundations have laid, it's all gone. It's all over. No more construction for 16 years. It just stops. Now, I want you to imagine that you're building a house and the foundations are down and some hecklers come along, have a go at your builders, and they go, that's it, we're leaving it, for 16 years. What did the Jews do during those 16 years? They shifted their focus. They decided, well, we're not going to do the temple, we'll do something else. And so they started rebuilding Jerusalem. They built homes, they built shops, they set up crops, and they started harvesting the crops. And life was pretty much getting back to pre-invasion normal, except for one thing. They didn't have the temple. That's the only thing, just no temple. It was the one building that never really got going. It's covered in weeds, and maybe it's got a few building pieces lying around, a few materials scattered around the property. Maybe it's got goats and dogs that might be wandering through. If you can picture this, it's been left for 16 years. You leave any property for 16 years, see what you get at the end of it. But basically, they've just left it, they've forgotten about it, and they've just focused on their own business for 16 years. We now get to 520 BC. And this prophet comes along. His name's Haggai. Sounds a bit like a meat, doesn't it? No, just me. Okay. The prophet comes along called Haggai. He has a message to the Jews, and it's a bit of a wake-up call, really. His message really is targeting their priorities. And in summary, he's saying to them, why haven't you built the temple? You need to put first things first. Now, this temple, just so you know what we're talking about here, was the place you went to worship God. We know that God is everywhere, but the temple represented a holy place. It represented a place on earth where God dwelt. And so to let the temple remain a ruin, to let the temple just be overgrown with weeds, it revealed something about the people's priorities. Because given that the temple was the place that you went to worship God, leaving it unbuilt just showed they were not really interested in worshipping God. They were clearly not putting God first. Enter Haggai. Now, if I try to relate to you who what this guy Haggai is like. He's a prophet, but he's like one of the footy coaches I had in the 1980s. He does not consider people's sensitive side. He doesn't sugarcoat situations. He's blunt, he's direct, he's straight to the point. That is Haggai. And he basically says to them, I'm going to summarise this, paraphrase this, stop being selfish. You need to start putting God first. He actually had 4 messages for them. If you read the book of Haggai, there's 4 messages. We're only going to look at one today. And this is in Haggai chapter 1. And it starts like this. On August 29 of the 2nd year of King Darius' reign, the Lord gave a message through the prophet Haggai. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies says. The people are saying, this is important, not God. The people are saying, the time has not yet come to rebuild the house of the Lord. Now, we already know this. The temple is a mess, right? It's a mess. All you've got is foundations, weeds and goats. The house of the Lord is in ruins. And the people are like, yeah, we know it needs to be done. And you know what? We really want it to be done. And we know it's super important, the temple, because that's, of course, where we go to worship. But we just haven't had the time. And, we've been building our own homes and we've been taking care of our families. So, yeah, we really want to rebuild that temple. We really want to do it. It's on our list of things to do. We're going to do it. But the economy's depressed. It's just really hard. It's hard to get a job. We don't have a lot of money. We'll continue to pray about it. But we will definitely build it. We're definitely going to build it. One day we will definitely do that. Just not yet. It's just not the right time. Haggai says, the people are saying, the time has not yet come to rebuild the house of the Lord. Let's put it another way. It's not yet time to focus on God. Ouch. It's not time to focus on God. It's not time yet to put God first. Doesn't sound great when you put it like that, does it? Shouldn't it always be the right time to put God first? And on top of that, they knew. It's not like they had to try and crystal ball or try to hear from God to know, is this what I'm meant to be doing? They knew this is what they were meant to be doing. The Jews saw God move when King Cyrus, who doesn't care less about God, say, you know what, I really sense you're meant to go and I'm meant to let you go to go and build this temple. They knew they'd been sent for the sole purpose of rebuilding the temple. And they witnessed this king who couldn't care less about God give generous amounts, enormous amounts of money and resources to build the temple. All of these things have happened. They experienced God's protection when they had to travel, and that was hard in those days, of all the money and all the resources on the road from Babylon to Judah, there was a good chance you'd be robbed. God protected them on that journey when so much wealth was at risk. God laid it all out for them. He made it very clear, this is what I want you to do. And he paved the way for them to be able to do it. And they're saying, yeah, it's just not the right time. When is the right time? Haggai then says, okay, so you couldn't do it. Yeah, right. Fair enough. Just one more thing. God asked me to ask you this. Just one question. Why are you living in luxurious houses while my house lies in ruins? Ouch. That's verse 4. You're saying you haven't had time to build the temple, but you've certainly had time to build your own. I think the first message that Haggai's really trying to say here is if you want to put God first, you have to stop with the excuses. God freed them to build the temple. He sent them to build the temple. He resourced them to build the temple. They had an embarrassment of blessings. But they were saying it's not the right time. And Haggai's like, just stop with the excuses. You're embarrassing yourselves. God's embarrassed you of riches and you're coming up with silly stuff. And there's a message for all of us here, I believe. We can all find excuses for not doing what God wants us to do. We can. And a lot of us, we can often say it's not the right time. I'm too busy with work. My kids have got all their sports. You know, once things settle down, then I'll do what I sense God's called me to do. Once all those other things I've sorted out. And it was this type of thinking that resulted in a temple being a ruin for 16 years. Because you know what? You and I will always be busy. We will always have excuses. We will always have things that will want to take the place of time we need for God. So if we're going to put God first, firstly, we have to stop with the excuses. If you and I want to put God first, the second thing we need to do is stop thinking about ourselves. In verse 3-4 it says, "Then the Lord sent this message through the prophet Haggai, 'Why are you living in luxurious houses? Why my house lies in ruins?'" God's house is in ruins. But they managed to build themselves some okay homes. No, some luxurious homes. They were prestigious. If you look back at the original words that are being used here, the type of building they talk about were the sort of buildings back then that they built for kings. And they were living there. These were completed projects. They have totally finished. Why are you living in luxurious houses? They're living there. These things are finished. They're not projects that they're working on. And yet, the temple hasn't received a second thought. Is it selfish to live in a nice house? No. Is it selfish to have a big house? No. I think those things are fine. If that's what you want, I'll tell you what's selfish. It's selfish when all our time and all our money and our talents and our energy go into building our own empire, leaving no time, no money, no talent and no energy into building God's kingdom. That is selfishness. Their priorities were wrong. All they thought about was themselves. They left Babylon with this intent to go and build God's temple, but the moment things got difficult, they dropped God's plan like a hot potato. How quickly they stopped. And they adopted their own plan in no time. You know, we are so easily drawn to doing what's best for us. I see a small version of that today in talking to pastors from various churches and people that are part of churches. You know, we are here. All people in all churches probably nearly believe the same thing. We are in these churches to try and build God's kingdom. Is that correct? That's why we're here. The moment we get a bit of opposition, the moment we're told you have to wear a mask at church, it is amazing to me how many people go, "I have to wear a mask, I'm out." I'm amazed at that. We're going to turn down living the life for God because we have to wear a mask? Like, that is nothing. These guys were getting at least some decent persecution. We're just told we have to put something on our face to protect ourselves from others. And whether you like masks, I hate masks, by the way. I'm not loving masks. But I'm not going to walk away from worshipping God at church and meeting with church family and trying to build the kingdom of God because of a mask. Oh my goodness, come on. I'm sorry, but it bugs me. It really bugs me. Their priorities were wrong. Hence Haggai's warning. If you plan to put God first, you have to stop thinking about yourself. And Haggai goes on. In verse 5, this is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. Look at what's happening to you. You've planted much, but you harvest little. You eat, but you're not satisfied. You drink, but you're still thirsty. You put on clothes, but you can't even keep warm. Your wages disappear as though you were putting them in your pocket, and your pocket's full of holes. He's saying, you guys have made a lot of excuses, and you've been living for yourselves. But where's it got you? you're still as bad off as when you're in Babylon because you're still not content. They're not content. You keep working and working and working, but you're not satisfied. You eat, but you're still hungry. You drink, you're still thirsty. You have clothes, you're still not warm. You make money, but you still never think you've got enough. Where does it end? No matter what you do, you don't have joy. You can't find joy. If you want to put God first, we have to stop with the excuses. We have to stop thinking about ourselves, and we have to start looking at ourselves. I don't mean in the mirror. I'm talking about taking a good hard look at ourselves. He says it twice in verse 5 and 7. Look at what's happening to you. Actually go and examine yourself. Stand back and reflect on your life. Consider the way you're living right now. Consider the decisions that you are making. How much of what we are doing builds God's house, and how much of what we're doing builds ours? It's a question all of us need to constantly, I think, look at. The Jews originally had it right. They had God at the centre of their lives, but when they walked away from the temple, they pushed God aside and they started focusing on pleasing themselves, and they suffered for doing that. Haggai 1:9 says, you hoped for rich harvests, but they were poor. And when you brought your harvest home, I blew it away. Why? Because my house lies in ruins, says the Lord of heaven's armies. While all of you are busy building your own fine houses. It's because of you that the heavens withhold the dew and the earth produces no crops. I have called for a drought on your fields and hills, a drought to wither the grain and grapes and olive trees and all of your crops, a drought to starve you and your livestock and to ruin everything you've worked so hard to get. Now look, God doesn't go, you do whatever I want or I'm going to punish you. That's not the point of what this is getting at here. I think the real point here is you put God's house first and God will bless you. There is blessing in obedience. You will lack nothing. And you know what? Jesus said the same thing. He said in Matthew 6, seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. We should regularly look at ourselves. Where's my time and money going? What am I using my talents for? Where am I heading with my life? What are my goals? And when I look at the answers to all the questions that I can think about of how I live my life, if I analyse it, if I look at myself, if I carefully consider, who's first priority? Is it God? Is it me? Is it my kids? Is it my spouse? Is it sport? Is it money? Is it success, power, popularity? It's something. When you answer all the questions of your life, what's it pointing to? What does it reveal in terms of our priorities? We need to do this regularly. You know, if I'm cruising on a boat and I don't regularly check where I'm heading, you know I'm going to end way off course. All I need to do is be a half a degree out. 300 k's later, I am lost. I have to regularly check the course I'm going, and I believe it's the same with God. We've got to regularly check where we're going, or before we know it, where we knew God wanted us going, we've gone somewhere completely different. Certainly what happened to the Jews. If I don't check where I'm going, I will soon drift from God's purpose to mine. Getting to my last point. If I want to put God first, I stop with the excuses. I have to stop thinking about myself. I have to start looking at myself. And finally, the key point today, big rocks first. I'm going to do a little exercise, and some of you would know this exercise, but I need I'd like a little volunteer. I was wondering whether Harry might like to join me on stage. You want to join me on stage, Harry? Would you do that? Oh, actually, I have a small problem. This is quite awkward. Can I get someone to go and get me... I'm missing 3 plastic cups from my office. Can I get 3 empty cups? That's wonderful. This is quite unexpected, Harry. And I guess this is being recorded and people may be watching this online at some point. So, how was your week? You can take your mask off because you're up here with me now. Yeah. That's good. How was it?
Yeah, good. Went on camp for a week.
What did you do at the camp?
Camp stuff.
Camp stuff. Pretty good. Did you learn anything about God?
No.
Honest? Actually, I believe the Year 9s went on the right journey. Was it the right journey? Yeah. What's the one thing you took from that? You must have got something out of it.
Not to sleep outside on a chair in freezing cold.
Sure. Good. Okay. Right, so, Harry, talking to a Year 9. Right. This is not a ball juggling sort of thing, by the way, okay? So, just going to leave that one over there for now. But what I want you to do, it's really simple, Harry. I'll put that aside. Don't need that, actually, for the moment. Here we go. Can you hold on to them? Okay. So all I want you to do, Harry, is to just fill that with them, if you don't mind. Yeah, one at a time is fine. Okay, excellent. So you've filled that up. We've got all of them in there. Excellent. Is it full?
Almost, yeah.
Almost, you're right. It's not quite full, is it? So what we're going to do is, they're my big rocks, okay? And so I've got some smaller rocks here. So do you want to put some small rocks in there? See how you go. Feel free to give it a bit of a shake. Oh, excellent. You can shake it up if you like. Yeah, excellent. Very good. Is it full?
Almost.
Almost, okay. Let's go again. So I've got some sand here. Do you want to pop that in as well? Yep, that's okay. Go for it. You've maybe gone, just give it a bit of a shake. Yeah, keep going. You can keep going with that. Sorry, it's a bit full. It's a bit over full. So we're doing too much. So you want to take a bit out of there. Just make sure it's only full, because we can't have any more than full. Excellent. Thank you very much. You're just going to stand there and look pretty just for a minute. All right. So this is full. I want you to imagine that this cup represents your life, right? This is a full life, and in it are all the big rocks, right? The golf balls, the big rocks, they're all in there. The big rocks, to me, represent, if you're going to put God first, the big rocks are the things of God. Does that make sense so far? So this is like, one of those might be worship, one might be time in prayer, one might be reading the Bible, and the other ones say, doing what God calls you to do, love others, anything that God calls you to do. 4 big rocks, they're all in there, and there's even room. It's not just crazy about God, because there's plenty of room for other things, isn't there? He managed to do all the little rocks. Look at all the little rice that's in there. There's lots of little things that you can do and still entirely have God in there. There's even room for the sand, for the really tiny little things as well. That's great. Now, this time, Harry, we're going to do it a bit differently. So, what happens is sometimes, not yet though, sometimes what happens is that people go, God is definitely my number one, but I'm just going to put the big rocks over here for a minute because there's so many other little things I need to deal with. So what they start doing is you start putting all the little things. So, like our job and our family, you could have done that slower. Do you want to do it again? Like, just leave it there, and you're doing it there, right? But do it slowly. Like, we're trying to build anticipation here. Okay, right, here we go. So, our job and our family, our spouse, kids, slow down a bit. We got our kids' sports. That's probably a fair bit. Stop. You're going too fast. Our friends, our hobbies, our pets, our homework, our chores, our gardening, our renovations. Studying. Yeah, there won't be much for that. Sleeping. And we've run out, you have to go back a bit. Shopping, watching TV, looking at our phone, procrastinating, worrying, all those things. And then so you can pour all that in, and all the other crazy things that you do, you just pour it all in. This is more phone stuff. Be honest, put it all in, that's it. Right, and then you go, here we go. You're nearly finished, Harry, you're nearly finished. And then you go, hold on to these. Thanks, mate. And then you say, but you know what? Those things, they're all important to me, but you know, my number one is God, right? God is definitely my number one. So now I'm going to put God in. Oh dear. But my life is full at the top. So I have a problem. I've got a bit of God because I'm attending church on a Sunday. I've got a youth on a Friday night. My mum sometimes prays for me, so I've got a bit of God, but like this stuff here, that's still over the top. You see, that's too high. But I've got... You can sit down. Can you give Harry a clap? I've got the pink part of God in my life. See, there's a problem here. I hope you can see this. The point here, and you've probably seen this exercise before, but the point's pretty simple. The point is, unless God is first, he's never going to fit. Can you see it? Unless God is first, he's never going to fit. Because with everything I do, I will always be able to fill my life, in this case, with everything but God, until I remember, that's right, but I heard that sermon, it convicted me a bit, so I've got to put a bit of God in. But the problem is, it's so full with other stuff. But amazingly, God's created life so that you don't have to neglect everything else if you want to follow him. God's all in there. You're able to live a full Christian life and still have time for rice, still have time for your phone, still have time for friends, for procrastinating, for worrying, for all those other things that you like to do. There's still time for it. But there's a point here, big rocks first. If you don't do big rocks first, you will never have enough room for them because I will always fit in other things, whether they're good for me or bad for me. Why was the rebuilding of the temple so important to God? It's because he knew that without it, he wouldn't have their hearts. Their hearts and minds would be focused on themselves. And to the people's credit, after Haggai preached, they got convicted. And they knew that what they were doing is wrong. Look at this in verse 12. It says, the whole remnant of God's people began to obey the message from the Lord their God. In verse 13, God says, I am with you. In verse 14, the Lord sparked the enthusiasm of the whole remnant of God's people. And also in verse 14, they began to work on the house of their God, the Lord of heaven's armies. You know, as they began, look at the order of these things here. As they began to obey God, God started to bless them. He said, I am with you, so you can't fail. I'm with you in this. And whilst they were busy doing their own thing, they were distant from God, but now God was with them and they felt his presence. And it changed them. They've become enthusiastic to do God's work. He gave them the desire and the passion to do all the things that God had called them to do. And then they started to fulfill the actual purpose God had for them. If we want to put God first, we have to stop with the excuses. We have to stop thinking about putting ourselves first. We have to start taking a good hard look at our lives, and we need to make some changes. We need to make sure that it's big rocks first. Big rocks first is so important. If we don't put big rocks first, we will never be putting first things first. There's no other way around this. I hope this morning, look, I apologise to an extent. I don't fully apologise. I only apologise if what I've said has come across as judgmental, because that's not the intent of what I wanted to do this morning. I don't want to come across as judgmental. This is as much for me as it is for you, right? This is not me trying to have a go at everybody else. It's not about being judgmental. This morning is hopefully for some of us a recheck, a re-examining of ourselves. I think from time to time we need it. We need a little kick up the backside, because otherwise we do tend to veer off a little bit. And I think that's what Haggai was doing with the Jews. They just needed a bit of a kick up the backside, being told, hey, what you're doing, it's not okay. That is not putting God first. It's actually not helping any of you. None of you are content. You've got no joy. Your life, you're basically miserable. But the moment that they decided to actually put first things first and actually said, you know what? We are going to start making sure that God is number one, and we're going to put the big rocks first. The moment they made the change, it's amazing how things changed for them. It's my heart for this church too. That's why we're doing this series. We want to see people putting God first above anything else, because that will bless you in every other part of your life. Just put God first. We're going to have a time of worship now. And, I'm going to open up for prayer after the worship, if you want to come for prayer after. But you know what? This morning, I think, is pretty much more about what Haggai said, and that is, take a look at yourselves. Like, use this time as you worship God. Lord, speak to me. Tell me what you want me to do. And then the key to that then is we have to obey. But I really want to encourage you, use this time to just thank God for who he is, for what he's done. Use this time to worship him, and use this time to allow him to speak to you in your life. God bless.